Good evening, everyone. This meeting of the City of Vacaville Planning Commission for Tuesday, February 28th, 2022 is hereby called to order. Before we conduct further business, I have two notes to make. First, we have had a little bit of technical issues. If we run into those again, we'll hold up on the meeting until those are taken care of. Second, and we've been going through this for a while with the COVID requirements, that I want to tell everyone that I appreciate your participation in tonight's Planning Commission teleconference meeting. The meeting will be conducted consistent with Assembly Bill 361, Resolution number 2021-088, and Government Code Section 54953, subsection E. So please bear with us as we use the remote tools. As always, if we have a conflict between being efficient on these remote tools or making sure everyone has a chance to participate, we will err on the side of making sure everyone has a chance to participate. And if that slows down the meeting a little bit while we're doing connections, we will make sure that those connections are viable. And the Planning Commission meetings can be viewed live on the city's website, which is www.cityofvacaville.com, or on our local cable channel 26. Instructions to participate from a computer are provided on the city's website, cityofvacaville.com, and you may connect to the meeting via the link that's listed on that agenda. If you're following along on the telephone and prompted for a participant ID, please press the pound sign to be connected to the meeting. If you are planning to participate, please follow along on the telephone or your computer. Don't follow along on channel 26 because there's a broadcast delay. Callers who wish to comment can raise their hand by pressing *9. Depending upon your individual settings, you may need to also press *6 after you've been unmuted by the host in order to open your mic. I can usually see if someone's mic is still muted, and so if you've been called upon but the mute button still shows, I may ask you to make sure you unmute. And then final, computer users requesting to speak can click the raised hand button with their Zoom controls. And with those items out of the way, I will ask the secretary to call the roll.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Chair McCauley.
Here.
Vice Chair Klein.
Here.
Commissioners Aldridge.
Here.
Beaumont.
Here.
Brecken.
Here.
Fortney.
Here.
And Lightfoot.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. If you'd all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Director, do we have any communications?
Thank you, Chair McCauley. We had one communication that was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting, and it's also on our website under the Oak Grove Apartments item, and that was it.
Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda. Do I have any commissioners who propose to change the agenda? Vice Chair Klein, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so moved.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the agenda as shown. Since we have a motion, we need a second. Any second?
Yes.
Okay, I have a second from Commissioner Aldridge. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Commissioners Aldridge.
Yes.
Beaumont.
Yes.
Brecken.
Yes.
Fortney.
Yeah.
Lightfoot.
Yes.
Vice Chair Klein.
Yes.
Chair McCauley.
Yes, the agenda is approved as shown. Item number 5 is business from the floor. This is a time to address the commission with issues that are not on the agenda for tonight, but that are within the commission's subject matter jurisdiction. And we limit comments to a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker or group of spokespeople per Government Code Section 54953A and the Vacaville Municipal Code. Are there any of our attendees who wish to address us on business from the floor for items that are not on tonight's agenda? I see no hands raised. Madam Secretary, anybody that you see on the phone indicating business from the floor?
I see no one.
Okay, then we'll move on from business before to the consent calendar. Consent calendar is where we take action on things that are typically routine and non-controversial, all in a single action. Tonight, the only item on the consent calendar is the Planning Commission minutes from our meeting February 15th, 2022. Do any commissioners have proposed amendments to those minutes? Seeing no proposed amendments, I will ask the secretary to call the roll for approval of the consent calendar.
Commissioners Aldrich,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Brecken,
Sorry, yes.
Fortney,
Yeah.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Vice Chair Klein,
Yes.
Chair McCauley.
Yes, consent calendar is approved as shown. We'll now move into item number 7, which is public hearings. 7A is the public hearing on the Oak Grove Apartments. For the members of the public who have not been to one of our planning commission meetings before, the way we proceed is staff makes an initial presentation and commissioners may ask questions of staff during that presentation. At the end of that presentation, we open the public hearing. Usually the applicant is given the first opportunity to make a presentation or comments under the public hearing. And then we go on to other people and you're recognized in the order that you raise your hand or indicate you wish to speak on Zoom or on the phone. We typically limit comments to 3 minutes. I'm not going to be real hard about that 3 minutes, but at 3, I will ask you to start wrapping things up, especially because this has been an item of a lot of community interest. And we've had several public meetings. I want to make sure we have a thorough discussion of these items before we take any action and it goes on to the city council. Before I ask staff to make a presentation, I'll ask if any members of the commission have had ex parte communications on this item. I have not, though I did have an opportunity to listen to the recorded public meeting that was held several weeks ago. Do any of our commissioners have ex parte communications? Commissioner Beaumont?
I attended or listened to the February 10th meeting.
Yeah, I don't think that qualifies as ex parte. I just want to make sure people are aware that commissioners were able to attend that. Any other commissioners with ex parte communications? Seeing no hand raised, I will turn things over to Director Morris and her staff for the presentation.
Good evening, Chair. This is Albert Enault with the Community Development Department. I'd like to thank the Commission for attending the special meeting of the Planning Commission. And here we are here to talk about the Oak Grove Apartments. So the request that we received is to construct a 60-unit affordable age-restricted senior apartment project on 2.11 acres located at 475 West Monte Vista Avenue. The project includes 4 requests, one for environmental review for a mitigated negative declaration, another for a zoning map amendment, a density bonus, and a plan development. Some background about the project is it started in July of 2020, in which the City Council approved the disposition development and loan agreement for a project. That project was for 60 units for low income and supportive housing. In October of 2020, the applicant held a neighborhood meeting. And then in December, city staff held a neighborhood meeting. City staff received many comments about the project, and those were forwarded on to the applicant, and they took the information and decided to revise the project. And then the applicant sponsored another neighborhood meeting in May of 2021. Following that meeting, city staff presented a merit hearing request before City Council on the zone change, and that was in May of 2021. City Council directed staff to take a look at other alternate sites that could accommodate this proposed project, and that separate analysis was brought back to City Council in September of 2021. Another update was provided to Council in October of 2021, and City Council provided some direction back to staff to consider a different type of project for this location. And in January 2022, this past January, the applicant and city staff presented a revised project for 60 units for age-restricted senior housing. And that revised disposition development and loan agreement was presented back to City Council in January. Following that, city staff held one final neighborhood meeting to present the revised project to the public and take in comments. And that has led us to today for this Planning Commission meeting. And here's what the project is. The site is 2.11 acres, includes a zone change request to convert the neighborhood commercial zoning to add a residential overlay to allow multifamily development on it. The project includes 60 units for senior restricted affordable housing. It yields a density of 28.4 units per acre. The project includes 2 buildings that are 3 stories each. The units within those buildings would range from 600 square feet to 795 square feet in floor area. The site itself would provide 66 parking stalls, and access would be provided off of West Monte Vista Avenue and secondary access off of South Orchard Avenue. The project is showing a modern farmhouse architecture design. The project itself would provide 4 staff members. 1 would be full-time, 3 would be part-time for maintenance and other needs for the residents on site. And this project also includes exceptions to development standards or concessions. This site plan shows the project laid out on the site with the 3-story building fronting on West Monte Vista and another 3-story building fronting on South Orchard. Perimeter parking abutting the fire station to the south and existing apartments to the east. You'll notice that primary driveway access is provided on West Monte Vista, and that secondary gated access provided off of South Orchard. In the center of the site, meandering pathways with some community gardens, tables, and then access to their community room that would be off of Building A, the 3-story building. You'll notice a couple of dots and circles in the center of the site and around the perimeter of trees that are to be removed, but also trees that are being preserved primarily in the center of the site that would provide shading over those meandering pathways and that community garden and those tables out there. This graphic shows what the proposed architecture and building would be viewed like from West Monte Vista. 3 stories inside, you'll see the leasing office is on the ground floor. Balconies are provided for a majority of the residential units. The architecture has a varying roof line with gables and varying wall planes that jet out and go in to help provide some variation in the wall plane. There are varying materials, board and batten and horizontal siding provided with this project. This picture depicts what the view for the other 3-story building would look like from South Orchard. You'll see that gated access to the parking lot on that screen also. So this project includes a density bonus and concessions. This should be familiar to the Planning Commission. We presented a number of these projects to the Commission in the past. This one, just a refresher for the Commission, density bonuses are regulated by the California Government Code under Section 65915. And what density bonus law says is a city shall grant 1 density bonus with incentives or concessions, waivers or reductions of development standards, and parking ratios for projects containing affordable units. So this particular, what state law says about this is if you have a project that contains 15% of the units for very low income households, then that project would be able to have an increase of 50% to that density that's already prescribed by the general plan. They would also be entitled to 3 concessions or exceptions to development standards. This particular project is proposing 100% affordable for very low income. And the concessions that are being requested by the applicant for this project, there are 2 concessions and they're related to private open space. One is to reduce the number of balconies for this project from 60, that would be 1 balcony for each unit or patio for each unit, down to 42. They're also requesting to reduce ground floor balcony sizes which the code prescribes that 100 square feet needs to be provided for those ground floor patios, to 59 square feet. The project also included environmental evaluations to consider whether or not this project would create new impacts onto the existing environment. City staff, working with a consultant, AES, prepared a mitigated negative declaration with the initial study, and that evaluated whether or not the project would create some impacts on the environment. But we found that all of those impacts would be reduced to less than significant with the incorporation of mitigation. That includes biological resources. Some of the mitigation for those is performing pre-construction surveys to determine whether or not there's any existing nests, so that way we avoid removing any nests prior to construction. There's also requirements in there for the accidental identification of cultural resources or tribal cultural resources on the site. There are noise requirements to ensure that any construction activities occurring on the site do not affect any existing neighbors that would be to the apartments and to the single-family homes to the south. This environmental document was circulated for public review and sent out to various agencies for their comments. It was a 30-day review. It went from December 7th, 2020 to January 6th, 2021. City staff did receive comments back from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Transportation, and Department of Toxic Substance Control. There were standard comments suggesting that the environmental document incorporates certain analysis. And looking at the comments, we determined that the environmental document had already incorporated those analysis and those recommendations. Since this project had been advertised to the public, we received some questions from different people, from commissioners, from the public, and at this time I'd like to go over a number of those questions. There's a question about whether or not the disposition development and loan agreement should specifically state that there is a no housing first policy for this project. And just a refresher for the commission, if you've been following this project, it went from a low-income housing project that contained supportive housing and housing first. And hearing what the public had to say about that, the applicant revised it to a senior restricted housing.
This is Chair McCauley. Could you explain what is the difference between supportive housing and housing first? Some of us and some members of the public, as well as some members of the commission like myself, may not know exactly what that means.
So for this, I think that would be best as a best descriptor would be for the housing director, Emily Cantu, to provide a description about the difference between those two.
Director Cantu, would you care to step in at this point?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you. Thanks for having me this evening. Regarding the housing first, description of that would be where tenants would move into apartments and they may have various issues related to their homelessness that they need to overcome. However, they would move into their housing first, move into the apartment first, and then receive direct and extensive supportive services through case management and referrals and direct professionals working with them to resolve those issues. So I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry if I missed something.
No, that clarifies it for me. Thank you. Unless there are other commissioner questions on that issue, I will return things to Albert. Albert, go ahead.
So the question was whether or not the disposition development and loan agreement should include a stipulation that specifically states that this project should not include a housing first policy. And so we took a look at this and working with the city attorney's office, and we're still working with the city attorney's office on this, determined that the current DDLA already stipulates the housing type, meaning senior restricted. And that already limits the type of funding options that the applicant can apply for. And it limits it to only age restricted senior housing. So if that were to change in any capacity in the future, it would still need city council review. And that would also change the project if there were changes from a senior restricted housing to some other type of housing, in which the planning commission would also need to review it. But just a friendly reminder for the commission that the disposition development and loan agreement has already been approved by city council, and it's not in the purview of the commission's action tonight. Another question that we received was on the hours of construction for this project. And we wanted to clarify for the commission that hours of construction are going to be regulated by condition of approval number 17, which states that no construction between dusk and 7 a.m. is allowed Monday through Saturday, and absolutely no construction is allowed on Sunday. There was another question about condition number 51 about no parking signs and the requirement to install no parking signs. We talked with our traffic engineering division and we confirmed that condition was incorrectly worded. It should say that the applicant must replace any existing signs that have been damaged to make sure that it is that they are currently providing the correct signage. There is no provision that restricts parking in front of the project. There was also a concern expressed by one of the members of the public about emergency evacuation and whether or not, if there was an emergency, would residents from this facility be able to evacuate? Some of them might be elderly, and how would they be able to get out of the building? So in talking with our fire department team and the applicant, we confirmed this particular project is not an assisted living facility. The residents that are going to be living here will need to be able to walk on their own, which means they will be able to go downstairs. And in some situations, depending on the scenario, the fire department may be able to come and activate elevators for people to be able to use them too. There were also some concerns about traffic circulation and whether or not an existing roadway would be preserved for access to the apartment sites to the east. We took a look at our original environmental review and talked with our traffic engineering team, and we confirmed that the level of service that is currently being experienced at the intersection of South Orchard and West Monte Vista would still comply with the general plan provisions with the incorporation of this project. That existing entrance for the Orchard Maples project, I wanted to show the commission a site plan, an aerial site plan that shows what this area looked like before. And you'll see that on the screen, you've got at the corner of South Orchard, that existing gas station, the corner of West Monte Vista and South Orchard, and those existing apartments that this project is located next to. Now, there was a concern about whether or not an existing roadway would be maintained. And there is a roadway currently right now that goes from these apartment sites through the subject site and then grants additional access along South Orchard. Now, that particular question was whether or not that particular road would be preserved. It would be preserved for this project. That additional access would be maintained for those existing residents at the Orchard Maples project. Some interesting thing about this whole project is you'll see to the south of this project site, the fire station that was originally proposed for this site was moved to the south. And then you'll see Morales Court was developed with single family homes. The purpose of moving the fire station was because the city had acquired the apartment sites, the Orchard Maple, some time ago, and they wanted to improve access for that facility because they had only had access to West Monte Vista. So what the city decided to do was move the fire station to the south, so that way the Orchard Maple site could have an existing road, a new road that would provide access to the backside of the portion, simply to provide convenience for access for those residents.
Albert, this is Doug Beaumont. I have a question on that moving the fire station. Did you read Alicia Minion's report or comments?
Yes, I did. And that's kind of what I was alluding to about the reason why the fire station was moved.
So you're disputing what she wrote then, I assume?
Yeah, I took a look at our project files to look at what the historical context said about these projects, and the development of the area for the Morales Court project which was referred to as the Eldridge Place Master Plan, combined with the fire station and the city acquiring those apartments, it was determined that it would work better for the overall master plan development to move the fire station to the south, so that way a secondary access point could be provided for those Orchard Maple apartment site.
Thank you.
So that's a clarification that I wanted to provide for the commission on some of the comments that we had received since providing notification about the project. And so that moves us to city staff's conclusion.
Albert, hold on. Commissioner Brecken has her hand up. Wendy, go ahead.
So at the time they moved the fire station, didn't the planning commission say they wanted to preserve this as residential, or sorry, as commercial, and not allow residential, and allow more open space for the existing apartments?
So they, looking at the original staff report and the minutes for the project, there weren't any stipulations that said there is no apartments allowed. It was more.
Albert, hold on. Wendy, I think we're getting an echo from you. Would you mute?
Sorry. I had my original sound on. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, Albert, let's try this again. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. We took a look at the original staff report and the context that was described in there, and there aren't any stipulations that say no housing can be provided. It was more of a clarification intended for the commission at that time to explain that while the city was acquiring the Orchard Maple development, there was no proposal at this time to construct housing on that adjoining site that had become free once the fire station had moved south.
Commissioner Brecken, did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Klein, you have the floor.
Hi, Albert. Just a quick question. Is that background reflected in the staff report and the timeline? I'm just trying to see if I missed it, because the information that I read in the Minion communication presumably is relevant to the project, and it should have been in the timeline. If I missed it, forgive me.
Well, in the timeline that was identified for the commission as part of their packet, we did identify previous actions that occurred, which was in June of 1963 that the city issued a building permit to construct the Glenbrook Hills Swim Club. And that we started off from there describing the disposition development loan agreement from July 2020. So the description about the surrounding development for Morales Court and the fire station are not typically items that we include as part of the staff reports. We might provide context about the existing site itself, but not say the reason why the fire station was moved to the south.
Okay, that's unfortunate. It would be helpful if we could get the full picture, because I'm having, we didn't get this public hearing before today. And I've said in the past that I prefer to receive public hearings, separate from the action request date. So when we're also having information presented to us from community members that wasn't in the staff report, that just is not helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Okay, Albert, go ahead with your presentation.
Well, with that context and background information about the project, planning staff does have a recommendation for, or we do have a conclusion that's reiterated in our staff report. We do support this project. There's a number of reasons and findings that are described as part of the staff report that explain why it's a good project. It meets the required findings for all of those land use entitlements for the environmental review, the density bonus, the plan development, and the zone change. It complies with general plan and zoning standards with the change to the zoning and with the density bonus provisions. It provides additional senior affordable housing for the community. That's a big deal. The project itself, the architecture is well designed. It provides sufficient parking to comply with city standards that have been adopted by city council. It's located near shopping for those future residents too. So with that, city staff has a recommendation for the planning commission. And that would be to adopt the mitigating negative declaration. It would be to adopt that zoning map amendment change from neighborhood commercial to include a residential overlay. And then it would be to approve that density bonus and plan development request for the Oak Grove apartments, subject to the conditions that are provided to the commission in the staff report. That is it for my presentation. We do have the applicant and their architectural team and Eden Housing here to help answer any questions that the commission might have or that the public might have.
Albert, this is Chair McCauley. I'm going to start off with a couple of questions and then ask other commissioners if they have them. First question is, have any of the previous actions taken on this site, for example, with the Planning Commission at an earlier date, talking about maintaining it for whether it was open space or for commercial, does that create an obligation on the part of the city to maintain it? Or is that something that it may be a bit of or more of a moral obligation, but it's not a legal obligation to the city that would bind the actions we can take tonight?
Well, in our review of the project, there's nothing that would bind the development of the project for commercial only. The descriptors that we found in the previous staff reports are more of a description of what those existing conditions of the site look like. One of the things that are bound on the site is an easement for that existing roadway that would provide access for the Orchard Maples onto South Orchard Avenue. And the applicant is proposing to maintain that and to keep that free for those future residents. The short answer for that is things are allowed to change. And from time to time, we do get requests to change the original intent that was designed. Since its initial, since everything else around the site has developed, this site has remained vacant. And so instead of neighborhood commercial, now there is interest for putting residential development on it. And possibly that might be a method for helping to continue the development within the surrounding area.
Thank you. My second question relates to the disposition and development agreement. With the city council having agreed to the DDLA and any funding in that, does that create any sort of obligation on the part of the Planning Commission to look favorably on the project? Or is this strictly discretionary that we should review without regard to the fact that there's a DDLA?
Well, the disposition development and loan agreement is an agreement between the applicant and the city for this project. And I can have Emily provide a little bit of description about how that works, but these land use entitlements, the zone change, the density bonus, the plan development, and the environmental review are discretionary actions that are up to the Planning Commission. There's no obligations to approve a project just because the city council approved a disposition development loan agreement.
Okay, that's what I was looking for to make sure on that. And then one technical question before I turn to the others is on the question of traffic. Right now it's a neighborhood commercial zoning. What's the difference in peak hour trip generation between neighborhood commercial and residential? If this, for example, was developed as a small shopping center, what would we expect in the number of trips, the number of peak hour trips there compared to a residential use on it?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I can tell you that the evaluation that was prepared in the environmental document and that was reviewed by our traffic engineering division determined that the existing roadways have been designed to accommodate a project like this, whether it be commercial or residential, and that no additional improvements are necessary for those roadways to accommodate this project.
Okay, only hand up I see right now is Commissioner Aldridge. So Jan, you have the floor.
Thank you. Albert, I spoke with you this afternoon regarding the age restrictions. Were you able to have my question answered?
On that one, I don't know, but we do have Eden Housing here to help provide some information about that one. Commissioner, could you refresh us on what that particular question was?
Yes, of course. My question was, it's age restricted apartments 55 and over. I live in an age restricted community of single family homes, and our restrictions say that we cannot have anyone under the age of 55 living with us unless we are married to them. In other words, we cannot have children living here They can visit for a maximum of 60 days a year, but they cannot reside in our community. I was wondering if that will be the rules for these apartments, or can people have their children or grandchildren living there?
I will at this point ask if anyone from Eden Housing, and I see Andrea Osgood from Eden has a request to reply. So I know there are two other commissioners waiting to ask questions, but I'm going to go to Andrea from Eden for a reply to that question.
Yes, thank you. So we would be limiting it to at least one person per household, has to be age 55 or older. And from there, unless our funding sources say otherwise, people could live there as long as they meet the occupancy standards, i.e. they don't have too many people living in a unit. So there could be a case of perhaps a single grandmother or grandfather that has a kid that now lives with them, and that would be allowed.
Commissioner Aldrich, did that answer your question?
It certainly does. Thank you.
Thank you. Next hand up is Commissioner Brecken. Wendy, you have the floor. And Jan, please go ahead and mute your mic.
Hi. So I'm noticing that the health risk assessment was not made a part of the staff report. And what the health risk assessment is it takes a look at the existing gas station where adjacent to the proposed project, and determines what the risk is of getting cancer and maybe other things as well. What staff says is that the cancer, the Montrose was the contractor, and there was a 2.6 cancer risk, per million. So if you take a look at, and they were using 2019 data. If you take a look at Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District's 2021 hotspots report, it says that the gas station at issue has a PMI, a point of maximum impact, of 27.6 cases per million. I just took a look at this today. So I'm hoping Montrose is in the audience and can answer some questions.
Staff, do we have anybody from the air quality consultant that might be available to address any questions that Commissioner Brecken has?
Unfortunately, we do not have anybody from Montrose Environmental today. I can provide some clarification on that report. I can confirm for the commission, yes, it was not included because outright that type of environmental document or that type of report is not something that is required by the California Environmental Quality Act for residential projects. That type of report, health risk assessment, is normally required for projects that are polluters, that are ones that generate pollutants, such as the gas station. And those types of pollutants or polluters are regulated by Yolo Solano Air Quality. Yolo Solano Air Quality does not regulate residential projects except for when it comes to whether or not the construction material or the types of things that are moving would throw up excessive dust. And there are measures that are provided by Yolo Solano Air Quality to help reduce the air quality issues that are associated with diesel exhaust for large dozers or backhoe equipment that might be on the site, or helping to keep dust down by watering on the site. So the health risk assessment is something new that's been brought up by the public. It's not something that is specifically required for residential projects because, again, residential projects are not polluters. It's only required for those gas stations. And we had this kind of come up for the Peabody Road, and we had Yolo Solano Air Quality provide some commentary back on these types of projects where, they regulate the polluters. And, the environmental review that had been conducted, the health risk assessment that had been conducted for this project, confirmed that there weren't going to be any pollutants that created significant issues for these future residents.
Okay, so a couple comments. first off, I think we need to look at the responsibility as planning commission, as planners, to not bring people to a cancer risk site. So, you know, where we have actual data from 2021 showing 27.6 cases per million, and you're not allowed to have residences. If you brought the gas station in, you couldn't have that gas station emitting more than 10 cases per million. So what you're saying is, well, we can get around the gas station thing because we're not bringing the gas station in, we're bringing the residents in. And so there's really nothing that says that we, you know, aren't going to cause cancer. So my questions I know you're not saying that, but I hope not. But the fact that Montrose is not in the room to answer these questions, there's a number of questions that come up. Is how did they come up with this data, and why are they using 2019 data? They're using their throughputs are 2019 data. That was a few years ago. And did they speak with the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District? Because it would seem that if they looked at the 2021 hotspots report, that I don't understand why there's such a huge discrepancy in the cancer cases. And in the Peabody project, where, it was acknowledged, okay, they're getting, relatively high doses of benzene. So we're going to put in filtration systems, special MERV filtration systems. And we're going to put in, there's like special underneath the building barriers and things like that. So that, because what happens is you have not only the underground storage tank coming from that gas station, but you also have the fire station has an underground storage tank. That's in the reports that you gave us. And usually underground storage tanks have a tendency to leak. So it gets in the groundwater. You get air, when you put a building on top of that, you get vapor rising up through the building. And that's why they've invented different vapor systems for such a thing. And so I didn't see anywhere in the staff report where you addressed those issues.
This is Director Erin Morris. I wanted to respond briefly to this topic. Really, the city staff relies on the expertise of state agencies to whom we forward the initial study mitigated negative declaration for comment. In the case of this project, we circulated that complete document with its technical reports to these state agencies for a period of 30 days. We don't call the state agencies to ask them to, there's a whole formal process for it. But I just want to point out that our staff are following the letter and the spirit of the law as it relates to vetting the environmental issues. And the staff report doesn't really dive into these things because we did prepare a complete initial study. So I think a lot of the information you're looking for would be in the environmental document and not the staff report.
I did not see it in the mitigated negative deck. I mean, I sort of searched around and looked for these issues and did not see them. And that's also not attached, but I looked that up and I didn't see the issue in there. So I'm kind of going along with what Commissioner Klein is saying, is that while there's been a lot of vetting to the public, and you've gone, the staff's gone back to the city council, the planning commission's this is kind of the first time we're seeing this project and had a chance to comment on it as planning commissioners. So maybe this should just be an informational session until we could get Montrose to answer these questions and then bring it back next time for a vote.
Thanks, Wendy. And that's certainly one of the options that we can talk about later on when it comes to action, is whether it's something where we wish to continue the hearing rather than take an action tonight if the majority of the commission is not satisfied with how any of these questions are answered. Wendy, your hand is still up. If you're done for the moment, I'll ask you to put it down. I also noticed Andrea Osgood's hand is still up. And Andrea, if you wanted to address this issue, go ahead and leave your hand up. If not, go ahead and drop your hand down. Andrea, your hand is still up, so I'm assuming you do wish to address the air quality issue. So go ahead and unmute and you can speak. Andrea's hand is now down. Okay, then Commissioner Beaumont, you have the floor. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. Just a couple comments and questions. I'm wondering, I see the architectural depictions of the 3-story buildings, but I didn't see any that showed how the 7-Eleven and the Shell station on the corner, whatever it is, looks compared to the 3-story building. It looks like they're overhanging practically the 7-Eleven. And I just wondered, are there any depictions that actually show us what that looks like?
The renderings that have been provided to the commission are those that are in the staff report.
Okay, if we don't want to see the bad part, that's fine. Then the next question I have is on the gate. Is there just a gate on the South Orchard parking lot, Albert?
That's correct.
And is that an automatic opening gate or do you have to have a clicker?
That I do not know. Perhaps Chris Kelly, the architect, or one of their team could help clarify what that information is.
And since I don't see any other commissioner hands up at this point, maybe
Well, I have more questions.
Okay, well, go ahead, but I will ask the applicant be prepared to answer the question on the gate when they make their comments. Doug, you still have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. It would have to be an automatically opening gate, I would assume, since that has access to the apartment parking. Otherwise, they would all have to have clickers. And if there's no gate on the West Monte Vista parking, that's taking up maybe 6 to 9 spaces that Glenbrook used to have for their pool, which I belonged to for about 20 years. And those spaces are used every day. And so that's 6 to 9 spaces that you don't have on the street anymore. And how do you guarantee that apartment dwellers get guaranteed their parking spaces and the apartment dwellers don't come over and park in the parking lot?
That's a good question about parking management. Eden is here to talk about how they intend to manage parking on the site and can help clarify information about that small detail related to the gate. I can't confirm for the commission that this particular project would be meeting the city's requirements for how many parking spaces are required for senior restricted projects.
Understandable, but we can't even keep parking downtown because we have no one to look after it. So I'm worried that the parking for the senior apartments would not be used by the senior apartments. They'd be used by the apartments surrounding it.
Doug, if I can get you to hold for a second, I see 2 hands raised that look like they're on the applicant's team. James Coles from Mosaic, I'll give you first access to the floor if it's to answer the question on the gate and parking.
Oh, yes, thank you. James Coles, Mosaic, we're project management for this project on behalf of Eden Housing. I'll let Jared Parker from Eden Property Management answer this in more detail, but each of the residents with the Oak Grove project will be required to register their vehicle with management, and the use of the parking lot is monitored and managed by the full-time on-site property manager as well as their staff. So it's highly regulated and managed because we don't want there to be a situation where there's people that don't belong to the property parking on the site. But Jared, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, so Eden Housing, we have a strict policy when it comes to parking. All our spots are assigned. They'll be assigned with residents that actually live at the complex. If any vehicles are in the parking spot of residents or anything like that that are not allowed, they will be towed. And in regards to that gate, it will be remote access only, not only for the residents that live at the senior complex, but also the residents that live in Orchard on that backside of the road. The reason I believe, and James, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why that access gate was put there is due to the fact that we don't want people to cut the corners. We don't want people to try to have to not wait for that light and just cut through the property and go around it. So that's why we put an access gate on one side in regards to that gate itself.
Commissioner Beaumont, did that answer your questions?
I guess so. It's still, you're going to have a tow truck there every day, I'm afraid.
And sometimes we do, that one full-time management person that will be on site will be living on site, and that's our job. That's what we do. We make sure that residents are following those policies and procedures, making sure that they understand that we want to be there to support them and help them out as much as we can by making sure that they have their parking spot available for them at all times.
And James and Jared, I'll ask you to go ahead and mute your mics and go ahead and drop your hand unless you have more to add on this. See none. Are there any commissioners with questions before we open the public hearing? I don't see any other hands, though we will certainly have opportunities for questions and comments up. Commissioner Brecken, when do you have the floor again?
There was a comment made that there are current grocery stores and shop, or maybe the comment was just shopping. There used to be a food fair at, across the street from the location. My understanding, I don't know, I haven't driven by there. Is there still grocery stores there? Is there nothing there? And how far away is the nearest pharmacy? And just thinking about seniors' needs.
Anybody from staff have an answer to that? James from Mosaic, I see again, has their hand up. And I don't see anybody from staff. So James, go ahead.
Yeah, we did outreach with surrounding property owners and businesses as part of the planning for this project over 2 years ago, and have continued, with the neighborhood meetings. And yeah, that is a grocery store across the street from the project, and then there are other retail establishments as well within
the
that
grocery store is closed.
Excuse me, don't interrupt me, please.
Excuse me, this is the chair. I will handle any questions about interruptions. So go ahead, Mr. Coles. You can go ahead and finish your comments.
We also look at other amenities that surround the property, including public transit, parks. There's parks nearby, and other amenities. So the project's well located to take advantage of those amenities.
Commissioner Brecken, I'll go ahead and give the floor back to you, though my recollection is the same as yours, that there was, at least I saw a newspaper article several months ago, that Food Fair had closed down. Have you been, or I see Albert's hand is up. So Wendy, before I go back to you, I'll go to Albert and see if he can specifically answer that question, and then I'll give the floor back to you. Albert, any input?
Yes, we have been reviewing a plan check of recent for a new market to go into that location called a Mayan market. I believe it is a Hispanic-based type of grocery store that is planning to move in and remodel the building facades for that location.
Thank you, Albert. I will return back to Commissioner Brecken to see if you have other questions or comments.
Thank you. Also, what handicap accommodations will be put in for seniors, if any?
Anybody from staff or the project team want to talk about that? James, go ahead.
Sure. We have accessibility available in the project for persons with disabilities. We're required by our funding sources to make a minimum number of the units fully accessible. Actually, all of the units in the project will be fully accessible for persons with disabilities, although we don't anticipate every resident to require that. It is available, and all of the units will be on an accessible path. We also are required by building code and ensure that the site is accessible, including the outdoor amenities. Part of the reason we're also planning for raised planters in the community garden area is to make the gardening as accessible as possible as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Brecken. Any other questions since you have the floor?
Water pressure, I believe Albert may have answered that at some point at one of the community meetings, but I'm still unclear on when the farmstead housing was under construction. I know that people in that area lost all kinds of water pressure, and they didn't have, for example, their bathrooms upstairs didn't have, you couldn't take a shower, you couldn't use the faucet upstairs. And I don't know if it was just construction. I think in general that area has water pressure issues, and the residents in that area have been complaining for years about it, and something needs to be done, and it's probably very expensive. But how does this add to that problem?
And Albert, I'll specifically ask if Public Works has had any comments on the water pressure, whatever the standards we have.
Yes, Public Works and the Utilities Department has reviewed this project and stepped with us as part of our project review committee. They concluded that this project would not create any further issues, that this project would be adequately served by the existing city's infrastructure for water, that there'd be adequate water pressure. I do recall Commissioner Brecken's reference to some of those comments. I believe that some of them were related to people expressing issues with being able to take a shower at the same time that, say, the sprinklers were going on, and that there was insufficient pressure to conduct both of those at the same time. For this particular project, it wouldn't be exacerbating existing conditions.
So whether it is traffic or water pressure, we have an established city standard. The project's not making those, not causing us to fail to meet those standards. Whether that's satisfactory to the people who live in the area is a separate question for whether it meets our established standards. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, correct. Personal preferences do change the way that people feel about whether or not a project does comply with it. But looking at the numbers and what the standard is, this project will comply with those standards.
Okay, so that's standard based. Wendy, your hand is still up. You have other questions or comments? Or are you done?
Thank you. Good for now.
Okay. At this point, I am going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Before I do that, a reminder to everybody, one person gets to speak at a time. The only two people, actually the only one person who can flat out interrupt is the city attorney, who can interrupt to tell us that we're doing something that's not legally allowed. Other than that, if one person's speaking, please wait your chance, you'll have it. And that goes for the public and staff and the commission and the applicants and everybody. You'll all get your chance. So we will give our first chance to comment to a representative of the applicant. You'll go ahead and have a chance to make an initial presentation, and then we'll go on to the public and make sure that every member of the public has an opportunity to comment as well. Is there a representative of Eden who wishes to make an initial presentation? I don't see a hand having come up. I see James Coles again has raised his hand to make a presentation for the applicant. So James, you have the floor.
I thank you. Just want to point out a few things. The first is just to highlight the amenities that are going to be offered at this project. In addition to providing 60 units of needed affordable housing that will help address the city's housing element and the regional housing needs assessment goals for very low income households. We have thoughtfully put together a design that responds to neighborhood concerns and planning input. We've made a number of changes over the last 2 years that we've been meeting with the public, with the neighborhood, and with planning in reducing the building size, the building footprint, increasing the amount of open space, increasing parking, changing the units to smaller unit sizes, changing the use of the property to restricted to seniors. So we feel like we've been quite responsive over an extended period of time to the neighborhood concerns. And so just wanted to highlight that. Also, the amenities we're quite excited about. We have on-site management and offices for supportive services and management on-site for the seniors. a community room and kitchen, a fitness room and computer lab. We're providing twice as much outside common area as is required through patios connected to the fitness and community rooms. We're preserving existing oak trees in the center of the site where the common open space will be with walking paths and benches, and also the community garden with raised planters. The parking will include 3 ADA accessible spaces, as well as spaces for on-site staff beyond, so that's beyond what is required by code. In addition, we're providing 7 pre-wired electric vehicle ready spaces as part of that. And of course, our team is here to answer any other questions, and we're happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And as we have questions or comments from the public, I may return to you. But at this point, I'm going to go to the public and ask any members of the public who have questions or comments, let you know now is your opportunity. Again, we'll ask you to keep it to about 3 minutes, but we want to make sure we have a good, thorough discussion. The first hand I see up is Lori Jones. So you have your 3-ish minutes of started. Go ahead, Lori. Lori, I can't hear you if you're speaking. You may need to adjust. It now shows you're muted, unmuted. Try again.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was.
Okay, we can hear you. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you very much. Just a few things. First of all, I've been one of the more involved people with the project, and I do appreciate the fact that they have taken into the community concerns and to make changes to the project from the original. To respond to Mr. Cole, number one, it's not 60 units, it's 59. One of them is for staffing, so we're only adding 59 units for senior residents. The grocery store across the street, when it was originally the food fair, had a wide variety of things. Because it's considered been a Hispanic market, we're not sure if they're going to have toiletry amenities or anything else that would equate to great shopping or having something accessible for senior people. So I don't think it's fair to say that it is the same thing as a grocery store until we have a better understanding. And just to give a little bit more information about Housing First and why our community is so concerned about it, is housing. What Emily Cantu forgot to tell you is that yes, amenities are provided for Housing First residents, but they are not required to be participants. So people that are addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol or anything else that are put into these apartments do not have to participate in any of the services provided. And that was something that we were very concerned about, especially in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So I can say the community does not, it's not that we were against it, we just didn't like the place that it was located. So you can understand our concern that we want to make sure that this is not going to be a bait and switch, that people are of Housing First or supportive housing are not going to be ever included in this project. And I want to make sure is if we don't have enough seniors that meet the criteria for these apartments, seniors or I should say disabled people, how are they planning on filling vacancies? Will it then go to the type of housing where they get supportive housing where they get additional funding? So that's a question I do have, but I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of, it's not that the community is against supportive housing, it's just the fact that it was not projected to us in the right way. It wasn't provided in any of the project descriptions, and it was only accidentally provided to us as one of part of the community meetings. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have to unmute myself. You had a specific question about if there's not a sufficient number of seniors, would it be available to others? I'm going to ask if anybody from the project team wishes to address that. Again, I see James Coles has his hand up. James, can you address that question?
Yes, thank you. We certainly don't expect any vacancy issues. In fact, there's a dramatic shortage of housing affordable to very low income seniors in the community, as there is throughout Northern California. The regional housing needs assessment, which is used to guide the city's housing element, has shown that there's a deficit of 239 units affordable to very low incomes. And so this will be filling that need, but just 60 of the, or 59, which is correct, 59 with the on-site property manager of that need of 239 units. And I think Jared Parker from Eden Property Management could probably speak to this further, that there are typically very long waiting lists for these projects because they offer affordable rents, which is quite rare, and housing is difficult to find that is at this affordable level. And I think Emily could probably speak to the vacancy levels within Vacaville that have been extremely low. Any market studies that have been done in the last 5 years, they've shown extremely low vacancy rates, 2% or less. But if Jared or Emily want to elaborate.
So I'll go ahead and call on other people then. So I will ask if either Jared, Ed, or Emily wants to address that, and specifically the question that Lori brought up. If there is a vacancy and there's not a demand for the seniors in the future, is there a provision for them to the units to be rented to non-seniors, or is it strictly limited to seniors no matter what? Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, so the type of funding that might be received at this project, unfortunately only allows us to rent to seniors, as long as, like Andrea said earlier, one of the households, usually the head of household, is 55 or older. So technically, no, if we do have a vacancy, but our waiting list is scarce, we will then unfortunately have to work with Emily to find other sources, but we cannot rent to non-seniors. We have to rent to a senior for the funding agreement.
And I'll take it that unfortunately working with Emily was because the vacancy, not because it's difficult working with Emily.
No,
I know, and I saw Emily's hand was up, so you have the floor. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Jared and James. There's will be a 55-year restriction that the units be rented to seniors 55 and older. Any changes would need to go back to the City Council for approval. And nothing's anticipated today, that's for sure, but there is a city restriction for 55 years to rent to seniors only.
Thanks, Emily. And I'll have to remember that my sense of humor doesn't necessarily come across in Zoom as it sometimes does face-to-face. So believe me, no slight was meant to you. Andrea Osgood from Eden has a hand up. So Andrea, you have the floor. Go ahead.
I wanted to reiterate that we would never change that. Eden's first multifamily property that we built over 53 years ago was for seniors. It's still for seniors today, and we have a long waiting list for that property. So we will always rent to seniors at this location.
Okay, thank you. I will now ask if other members of the public wish to ask questions or address the commission. Stacy Kendrick has a hand up. Stacy, go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that I agree with everything that Lori Jones has said earlier, but I am concerned to hear that, say, grandparents could have younger people living with them, and how do we know how many people are in a unit and how many of them are younger than 55? And what is the remedy if, say, a grandparent has a younger person who has another car, and then they have another person come to live with them and they have another car? What is going to happen with the parking situation? And what is the remedy for over occupancy in each one of the units?
Stacey, I'll go ahead. Your timing is held in abeyance. And I'll go ahead and ask somebody from Eden to address that question. Both Jared and Andrea have their hands up. So one of you go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay,
Andrea?
I'll start. I can start and I'll hand it over to Jared. So as I mentioned earlier, grandchildren can live in our units. We have hundreds of senior properties, or not properties, but units across our portfolio. And I would say this is a very rare occurrence, like, a handful or less. But as I mentioned earlier, the general sort of occupancy standards would apply, and these are all mostly one bedrooms. So this is where I'm going to hand it off to Jared to remind me how many people are allowed to live in a unit that's only one bedroom.
Jared, go ahead.
Yeah, so we follow all state and local laws depending on occupancy. So usually standard for a one bedroom is max 3, 2 in the bedroom, 1 in the family room. In regards to if you said, I believe if I'm correct, Stacy, you said if the senior was to pass away or anything like that, then what would happen? We would take care of that matter at the end. I believe our subsidy at that point states that the head of household always has to be a senior. And then in regards to parking, because we have 60 spots and 60 units, each resident would only receive 1 spot. And that spot is for that unit. And so no, even if they have 2 or 3 cars, unfortunately, each person receives 1 spot.
Stacy, you've used less than a minute, so you have more time to make comments or questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. So if they say there are 2 or 3 cars for that unit and that only 1 can park there, where do you see those other cars going? Are they going to be across the street at the Mexican meat market, or where do you see those cars going? Because I see them being parked on the sidewalks, on the streets. I just don't know where they're going to go.
Again, anybody from Eden wish to address both your experience and what you would anticipate for the behavior of your tenants if there's multiple vehicles for the same unit? James, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Jared and Andrea could speak to this based on their experience with low-income senior housing and the properties that they own and manage. But it's typically a 1-bedroom senior apartment will be occupied by 1 person. It's very rare that they're occupied by 2 or more. Jared, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I have been working in affordable housing for over 20 years, and the large majority of these units will be occupied by 1 senior. It's very rare that there's even 2, and even more rare that there are more than 2 people. So, and I would also say, based on our experience, that there will be a number of residents that don't have a car at all, and it's very rare that a household will have more than 1. And this is just speaking to low-income seniors as a resident. But Jared or Andrea, you could elaborate if you'd like.
Andrea, your hand is up, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to point out that most of the senior housing that Eden develops in these kinds of suburban, kind of more typically auto-dependent locations, still we typically park our units at a ratio of half a space a unit and find that to be completely adequate. So actually here we're going to be double the amount of parking that we typically provide. So even if we had more than 1 person living in a unit, which as James said, I would also say that is true. We typically see mostly 1 person households, that the amount of parking that we have provided here is more than adequate and more than we typically do on the same kind of location.
A question for city staff. Do we have requirements and restrictions from the state of what we can or cannot require as far as parking for a project like this?
Well, the municipal code establishes standards for what these types of projects are required to provide. And those standards are established by City Council's adoption of municipal code. For this project, they're required to provide 1 parking space for each unit and 60 stalls. And that's it.
Okay, so I'm going to follow this one up a little bit because my question was about state requirements. If the city sets a standard, but we, for example, find that based on the local circumstances, we don't think that standard is adequate, do we have the discretion and the ability under our code to ask for additional parking? And I'll ask for go back to the state in a second, but under the Vacaville code, do we as the commission have the discretion to ask for more if we think that's appropriate given the circumstances?
There are limitations. Well, I don't know if there is anything in state law that says local municipalities shall not require more than the required parking. It's different for senior restricted housing than it is for projects that are located near transit centers. You know, for instance, the Allison apartment projects. That particular project, in state law, there was a provision that said that you couldn't require more than a certain amount of parking. For this project, it's different. State law doesn't specifically say that. However, within the density bonus law, if there are certain provisions that prohibit municipalities from requiring additional changes to the project that would create an undue fiscal impact to the project that would make it unfeasible.
Okay, so that gives us a balancing act we need to work within of not getting the city sued in our action, but making sure we're giving adequate requirements to the project based on its circumstances. Stacy, you still got about a minute and a half left if you have any comments or questions. And if not, then I'll go ahead and check with other members of the public. Do you have other?
I do have one more question of clarification on the occupancy limit. I heard that typically a 1-bedroom unit might have up to 3 people, but what is the regulation about that? I mean, we although, you know, in times past, in the last 20 years, when we have had experience with these types of units, that was in the past, and times are changing, and we're getting a lot more low-income people. A lot of families are moving together. We have chain migration. If things are going to be changing in the future, how will we know that these units won't be overcrowded? And what is the remedy if that is to happen?
So would anyone from staff, and then I'll go to Eden, want to address, are there legal limits to the amount of occupancy, the number of occupants per unit? And maybe I'll come back to staff in a second, but I see Andrea's hand is up. So Andrea from Eden, you want to go ahead and address that topic?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify though that when we said that up to 3 people could live there, we did not say it was typical. We said that was actually an abnormality. But what is typical is 1 person. From a regulatory point of view, though, for most of our funding, we do have occupancy limits where we can't have more than a certain number of people. I will have to get back to you on specifically what those are, but I think Jared is probably right that they are no more than 3 persons per 1 bedroom for the funding that we get. If the city has occupancy standards that they want to impose on these units, I think we're also fine with that. From Eden's point of view, we follow these regulations very strictly and we comply with them. And most of the over occupancy kinds of households and properties that I see out there are the ones that don't have the amount of regulatory oversight that we see with all of the funding sources that we leverage to our projects.
Emily, your hand was up briefly and then down. You want to address that, or was that covered?
Yeah, I was, the question was making me think, and from the Housing Authority will be a partner in this project, and they have occupancy standards. It sounds like some of the other financing that the project may get may be more strict, but the Housing Authority allows 2 persons per room. And as far as a remedy, if there were too many people in a unit, then the Housing Authority would work with that household and so that they can move to an appropriately sized unit.
Okay, thank you. Stacy, you still got about a minute if you have other comments or questions. Don't have to, but you have the opportunity.
That's okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have other members of the public? And Stacy, your mic's still open, so I'll ask you to close it.
Thank
We
you.
have other members of the public who wish to address the commission or ask questions on this topic. I don't see any hands coming up on Zoom. I will ask Nancy, is there anybody on the phone or otherwise that indicates they wish to address this?
I see no one.
Okay, I see
Well,
two hands
Chair?
just showed
I
up.
got two just showed up.
Yes, I saw two just showed up. So Edie Thomas and then David Basilia. So go ahead, Edie. You have the floor.
Yes, hello. Hi. My name is Edie Thomas, and I apologize I was not able to get on sooner. I had a previous engagement and it ran really late, but I did want to just get on the meeting really quick just to say that I've been in support of this project for as long as we've been talking about it. And I'm really excited. I hope that the questions and answers have been adequate. And my programs, Connections for Life, we work with people that have significant disabilities. And we do have a population that's that would be eligible to participate in this housing program, this project. And so we're very excited to see something like this become available in Vacaville. And I'm just really grateful, and I'm really excited and anxious to have this come to fruition after all this time.
Thank you, Edie, for your comments. I see another hand is up for David Basilia. I hope I pronounced the last name right. So Edie, you still show your mic is open. I'll ask you to close it. And I'll give David 3 minutes to address questions or comments. David, go ahead. David, if you're speaking, we can't hear you yet. You're still shown as muted, David. There you go.
Okay, we're good now?
We're good now. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. You know, it's really kind of ironic, you know, as a kid, you know, I swam at that swimming pool. My father, ironically enough, opened up that service station that's in question on the corner of South Orchard and West Monte Vista back in 1970. It used to be a Gulf gas station. There was nothing that was around there. So obviously, you know, development happens and it changes. But this project, I just still don't see it fitting on this side of town. I mean, it's obviously better than that, for lack of better words, and I'm trying to temper it, load of manure that Eden was trying to lay down in our community and our neighborhood the first go around. This is just slightly better. These structures are huge, even at 3 stories. I drive around town. You go over by the corporation, you're on Allison Drive, or you go in some of these other areas where these new apartment complexes have been developed, and they stick out like crazy. I mean, I'm just curious as to how high these things are compared to the highest structures in the surrounding area. And I'm not talking about the 12 by 12 church steeple that's at the corner of Eldridge and Monte Vista. I mean, the other structures in the area, how much higher are these 2 structures going to be than the surrounding area? In my opinion, they still are just too big. Things need to be scaled down even more. Bring in the housing type that we're talking about right now, but on a much smaller scale. They're just very grand, and I think that it's going to change the look of this side of town and the feel forever. But anyway, that's my question, and I'll wait to hear the comments or the answer.
Great, you got still about a minute left, and I'll ask staff, do you have something that can give us the height? And especially since there is a 2-story office building across the street, how does the height of these units compare to the height of the office building? And Dave, right now, I think your mic's still open. While we're waiting for a reply, I'll ask you to mute, and then I'll come back for any follow-up. Anybody from staff want to talk about building height?
Hi, Chair. This is Albert.
Go ahead, Albert.
For this project, the building height would be 32.5 feet. And for comparison to what the code allows a maximum height of 45 feet. So they could have a project of 45 feet tall. Unfortunately, I don't know what the height of the buildings across the street, such as the future Mayan market or the offices.
And I see Emily's hand is up and then James' hand. James, since you're with the project, I think I'll go to you first, and then I'll go to Emily. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, our architect did look at comparable structures in the neighborhood that were a similar height, and he might be able to provide more specifics. But we did note that the grocery store across Orchard is very similar height to the 32 feet that we have proposed here. There's a two-story commercial structure at the intersection of Orchard and West Monte Vista that is very similar in height. It was mentioned earlier in the meeting that there's a gas station with the Shell gas station with the overhang that is also very close to 32 feet. And of course, there's two-story buildings right adjacent that are residential. And then down the street on West Monte Vista, on the same block is the church building, which also at its highest point is very close to the 32 feet. So there are a number of structures in the area that are of similar scale. And I don't know if our architect, Chris Kelly, wants to elaborate on that, and it sounds like Emily might as well, but thanks.
Yeah. Chris, I'll go to you, and then I'll check with Emily, and then I'll go back to David. Chris Kelly, you have the floor.
Yeah, Chris Kelly with LPS Architects here. So a couple things about the roof height, right? As we stated, the eave height is 32 feet, but the city average measures the building height by the average roof plane, which is actually 36 feet 6 inches for this building. So it's a little bit taller than that. And just to be clear, the tallest point of the tallest part of this building is 42 feet. So really, but our definition here is the 36 feet 6 inches. And I did look at a few other buildings across the area. So directly across the street on Orchard, the Orchard Professional Center, that building height is 30 feet. So as ours is 36.6, theirs is 30 feet, and that's the two-story office building. Also across the street is the Food Fair building, which sounds like it's going to be converted to a different grocer. It has an average roof plane because it has a sloped roof condition to it of 22 feet. So our building is definitely taller than that at 36.6. And then the height of the Trinity Baptist Church down the road is on average 30 feet, with the highest point being 35 feet. So we're pretty comparable with the office building across the street. Granted, it's 30 feet and we're 36. But just to give a little bit of elaboration, that yes, we're slightly taller than three of the largest buildings in the area, but well under the 45-foot height limit.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the information you were able to give us. Emily, did you have anything you wanted to say before I go back to David?
Thank you for checking in. No, Chris provided the information that I was going to provide. Thank you.
Okay, then I will go back to David. You still have about a minute your time left. Anything further?
You know, I guess I do have one other quick question. Because there's been a lot of talk about parking spaces, and when they were talking about the project earlier in the parking spaces, they talked about 7 electric vehicle charging stations, and typically those are reserved for electric vehicles. I mean, are those dual use? I mean, there's a lot of talk about more than one person having a vehicle that could be a tenant at this complex. And I tend to agree with them. I think that it's very true that ultimately there's going to be way more vehicles than parking spaces. So my question again would be then about the dual use on the electric EV parking spots.
And I'll go back to staff and ask specifically, is there provisions that if there's a certain number of electric vehicle charging spots, but not that number of electric vehicles, can those spaces be used for non-EVs? How do you handle that?
The code identifies 60 parking spaces that are required. It doesn't say that they all have to be reserved for the residents, or it doesn't say that a certain majority in addition needs to be accessible or for electric use. It just says 60 parking stalls.
You see James's hand is up. James, do you have anything to add on that question?
Yeah, the 7 EV spaces are not exclusive to electric vehicles. They're simply available for any electric vehicles that may wish to park there. So we would not exclude other vehicles from parking there. And we're just allowing for that amenity to be available to the residents. But certainly I think the first order of business to ensure that residents have their parking space. And I don't know if Jared or Chris want to add anything to that.
Anybody else from Eden? Chris, your hand is up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just elaborate a little bit on the electric vehicle charging. So those would be level 2 chargers. It takes about 4 hours to charge a vehicle. And so the idea is that property management would kind of encourage the electric vehicle charging to utilize those spaces for 4 hours. So that they're not necessarily taking up other spaces per se. But again, I think just to elaborate on the parking is that, that on average, senior affordable apartments hover around 0.5 to 0.75 spaces per unit. That is the demand that we see. And I've got 6 senior affordable projects right now. And they're all about 0.7, 0.75. This one actually has the highest parking ratio of those. And it's at the 1 space per unit on average. And then we have a few additional spaces, as we've mentioned, for staff parking. And then also we have accessible parking, which could be a resident space likely. So I feel like, in my opinion, that it's adequately parked.
Thank you. Dave, you still have a couple of seconds left. You have an opportunity for a quick cleanup before the clock runs out. Go ahead if you have anything.
Well, I'll just make a comment. I mean, I hope that the Planning Commission, rejects this proposal the way it's coming across right now. It's just still too big and its footprint. I'm not opposed to that type of development on that site, but something on that scale, I think, is just out of place. And I thank you very much for your time and everybody for taking the time to answer my questions.
Thanks for participating, Dave. I'll ask you to make sure you go ahead and mute your mic. The next hand up is for Alicia Minion. So Alicia, you have the floor. And once you start speaking, I'll start your 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just have some questions. When I was listening to the prior caller, David, he was talking about how this project seems still too big. And then staff was bringing up kind of the height around the surrounding areas. And I think it's important that the architecture is really different surrounding this building. So when you compare sort of the highest peak of, the grocery store, which has kind of a curved roof, or the highest peak of some of these nearing buildings, it's not going to feel the same. This project is actually going to feel huge just by the fact that of the height consistency surrounding the rooftop and the setbacks, right? There's not a lot of room. And there's not a lot of room because, as I've said in other meetings, this area was never intended to have, this lot was never intended to have housing. That's why it was never in the housing element. It was really to provide an alternative entrance to the apartment project that I think it's called Orchard Maples, something like that. It was also to alleviate traffic. And it was also to provide additional open space to families because that project, as you know, it's very compact. And that's why when I sent you a letter, I sent you a picture of a photo of all the cars that were parked right in front where the pool used to be. So, you know, it's, in my view, it's a little unfortunate because it's just another example where the Vacaville Redevelopment Agency acquires land. It was for a specific purpose, in part to provide more open space for the families of the apartment complex next door. And then it just never happened. It reminds me of Brown Street, where, you know, redevelopment buys that, and then the city gets a loan grant from HUD to promising all these great things to the neighborhood, and then it never happens, and then suddenly tough sheds are going to go on. And yes, this area is not as extreme of an idea to put tough sheds, but it's kind of the same idea. That's why I sent this email. I just think it's really important to understand the history. What was the original idea? And maybe the original idea may not be a good idea, or maybe the original idea was what was best for the area. And that's why the area kind of looks the way it does. You don't have these big, tall structures. And so speaking of that particular area and how this project will transform the look and the feel, I'm wondering if Eden Housing or any other developer has approached the owners of the shopping center or the commercial building, and whether there's going to be housing there one day, because that's also zoned neighborhood commercial. I think Food Fair.
Alicia, you're a bit over your 3 minutes, so please wrap up pretty quickly.
Okay, well, basically what I'm saying is what could happen to that? Is there any developer express any interest in that area? Is this sort of the beginning of more similar housing in that same architecture, same height? Thank you.
I will turn to staff to ask for a specific response to, would there be the possibility of a residential overlay to be applied to other commercial properties within the vicinity of this project site?
Chair, if I may, before we turn to staff, I do want to caution.
Go ahead. This is the city attorney speaking. Go ahead, David.
Yes, I do apologize for interrupting. I just want to caution that the agenda for tonight is on this particular subject. And so, and pursuant to the Brown Act, we do want to be careful as to how far we get into other topics. Thank you.
I appreciate the reminder, and it's good to make sure we're focusing on the item. I think since one of our questions is whether we should use our discretion to apply the residential overlay zoning, I think it's an appropriate question to ask, is there the potential for that to be applied in other areas that could have a long-term impact? And I think that probably is within the Brown Act or subject matter purview. But I thank you, David, and you should always feel free to interrupt. I see Director Morris's hand is up, and then James Coles has his hand up. Director Morris, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair McCauley. I just wanted to respond to the question, I think in a way that's safe on the legal side, that there's no guarantee in the future that a variety of sites in Vacaville will not be considered for housing. As the commission is aware of, based on our last meeting, we do an annual report on housing production, and we're in the middle of preparing a housing element update. So that overlay question, we shouldn't get into specific sites that are not on the agenda, but it really is in the current council or future councils completely within their discretion to determine whether other sites are appropriate for overlays. I can say that our department has not received inquiries of any kind about introducing housing on any other sites except for the one that's before the commission this evening, if that does help indirectly respond to that question.
I appreciate that, Aaron. I see James Coles has his hand up. Then we have another member of the public with a hand up. James, do you wish to address this issue?
I just want to address the issue of the building scale and setbacks. And just going back in time from our first proposal for this project, when we came in, we did hear the concerns of the neighbors about the building scale, and we did want to propose a project that would address those concerns and integrate with the neighborhood. We did make significant changes to the project scope in reducing the number of larger units. We went to 45 one-bedrooms and 5 two-bedrooms. We reduced the building footprint significantly so that we are now incorporating setbacks that far exceed what's required by the development standards. So we're going to now, with our revised proposal, we have a 25-foot front setback while the required is 15. We have a 47-foot rear setback while the requirement is 20. We have a parking setback of 30 feet while the requirement is 15. We have a landscape setback of 26 while the requirement is 15. So we tried to genuinely incorporate revisions to our design at time and expense to address those concerns. And we feel like we have a project now that has buildings that are much smaller in scale and that have addressed many of those concerns while still providing, the much needed affordable housing for the community.
Okay, thanks, James. And Alicia, your hand is still up, so I'll ask you to lower that. I see another member of the public identified by PCMTB has their hand up. So you have the floor and 3 minutes to make your comments or ask questions. Go ahead. And your shown is muted right now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Claire Borge, and I'm a member of our community. I don't live very far from this project, and I've been supportive of this project from the get-go, and even more supportive of it because it is going to address our very low income seniors who deserve to have safe lodging and deserve to be able to, I feel fortunate myself to be able to own my own home. And that's, really a lucky thing because many people do not have the wherewithal to provide fancy things for themselves. And I think our seniors deserve a great place to live. And I'm confident, having listened through this process, that Eden really has listened to us and is going to create something that will allow members of our community who are quite vulnerable to have a wonderful space to live. And so I really encourage you to support Eden Housing's idea for our community because it's much needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for your comments. And I'll ask you to go ahead and make sure you mute your microphone and lower your hand on Zoom. Are there any other members of the public at this point that wish to address the commission? And I will once again ask the secretary, is there anyone on the phone or that you're aware of that wishes to address the commission on this?
I see no one.
Okay, and since no other hands have come up with the public, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this. And we now go on to commissioner discussions. And it seems to me that we've got a couple of things that have been talked about here that maybe is how we want to start our discussion. One of the questions is, do we have enough information to make a decision? I know Commissioner Brecken asked questions about some of the air quality. I don't know if other commissioners are looking for other issues. So I think that's one thing that you might want to talk about. And the other is the question of, is this an appropriate place for the residential overlay? And if we like the project and think that it's a good place for it, and say the RO is appropriate, then that leads us into the discussion of some of the design and parking issues. So I think those are the major issues that I heard for discussion. And with that, I will throw things open to any member of the commission who now has opinions and directions and where they think we ought to go on this. And Vice Chair Klein is the first with his hand up. Brandon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair McCauley. And I'd like to thank the project proponent and the staff and others from the community who have given up their time to helped to shape this project and its current sort of how it's presenting to us. I do have some concerns. Just, you know, I don't need to belabor my comments earlier. I know that Albert and Aaron and everyone who worked on this project has been working very hard. And, you know, it's not lost on me that I have nonetheless stated in the past that I don't like getting the same project during the public hearing where we're going to need to take action on an important project without having any background. And here I'm looking at the history of this project just from the staff write-up. I have this one that this began in 1963, and then there's like a 40-year gap. And it doesn't include, it picks up at July 2020 with the city council. And it looks like the city council, this project is substantially important enough to where the council has reviewed it a number of times. What is a concern to me is that we're not on the council, right? This is the planning commission. It's our job to be diligent about looking at the needs of the community. And in that way, this is not about whether or not the seniors deserve a great place to live. We need to be diligent, and we need to make sure that our seniors are getting the very best place to live. And so if there are concerns that have been highlighted tonight for the first time before this commission, as to public health, as to issues with the scale of the project, I have questions about what makes Eden so unique in terms of their ability to enforce parking, where we've had significant challenges with parking enforcement downtown and in other areas in our community. These issues give me pause, and I don't want to vote no, because I agree that our seniors do need a high quality place to live, and we do have the need to do our jobs and not just duck these issues. But I do have questions, and you know, this public hearing has not done much to make me feel like I would be doing a diligent job if I just made a vote tonight without all of the information that I'd like to see. So it would be my preference to hold this over to the next commission meeting and maybe do a little bit more research and hear more from the public, because these aren't just my concerns. People have said to me how much they appreciate being able to hear about issues from all sides before we vote. And airing these issues out between meetings is how we facilitate that. So again, I don't want to vote no, but I'm not inclined to vote yes based on the information that I have tonight. So it'd be my preference to space this out. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Before I go to other commissioners, I will ask staff to address specifically if we decide we need more information before we take an action, what would be the process and the timing for asking for that information and then having the item come back. And after I have staff talk about that, then I see Commissioner Fortney's hand is up. But Aaron, would you care to address, Director Morris, care to address the options if we choose to delay action?
Thank you, Chair McCauley. This is Aaron Morris, Director of Community Development. The options, if the Commission wishes to continue the consideration of their recommendation to a future meeting, would be to do that by motion and vote and continue it to a date certain, if that's what the Commission wishes to do, in which case the next meeting would be the regular March meeting of the Planning Commission. That may have some impacts on the project and its funding. So I would ask, if you would indulge me, Chair McCauley, to ask the affordable housing developer how that would work or not work for them from a financing standpoint. Another option
before we ask that, I'm actually going to turn to the city attorney, because I know funding is not within the purview of the Planning Commission. And I want to make sure we're not accidentally considering something that we should not be considering in our action.
Thank you. I think as far as receiving information such that the Planning Commission can make a complete and educated decision, to that extent, the commission can hear the information, but then as far as making the decision to whether to approve the recommendation to city council or not, that the financing mechanism should not factor into that.
Okay, that leaves me a little bit nervous. I think I want to go through and talk to the rest of the commission members, hear their thoughts before we go further and talk anything about financing. But thank you, David and Aaron, for your input. Commissioner Fortney, you have the floor. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go into my comments, I do have one question. So listening to the community this evening, most of their concerns are enforcement issues. So we have an on-site manager with Eden Housing here on this project. So if the residents in the local area don't feel the forcing or the parking problem is being enforced by the local management, who is their next contact? Is it through Emily's housing department or is it directly to PD?
I will ask Emily to be the first one that addresses that. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you for the question. Yeah. Well, certainly our office, when we're involved as a lender, we have certain agreements on the property. The property management is an issue that our office can, the word's not enforce, but work with Eden to ensure they're managing the property correctly and in accordance with all the agreements. So if there are an issue, it can definitely come over here. We're happy to work directly with Eden and ensure that any issues are taken care of.
Okay, perfect. So at the end of the day, everybody should feel comfortable that there's another second set of eyes that will get involved with any of the concerns that the residents have.
Absolutely, yes. And again, to add, the housing authority is also involved, and that's out of my office, but we have staff to work on those things.
Thanks, Emily. Mike, you still have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, so going back to my comment, there, outside of Lagoon Valley and maybe Green Tree, this project has seen more engagement from the community and city council directing staff and the applicant back and forth. I feel completely comfortable after listening and watching all of the meetings and hearing that this project's met all the findings for a zoning map amendment. Some of the concerns or assumptions that the residents do have. Some of the things that we do know is that the current council has made senior housing a priority in Vacaville. We do know that this project will create real wage jobs for our tradespeople that live in Vacaville to actually work on a project that's local. Something that was never brought up today. These seniors, between the on-site amenities and what's provided at the McBride Center and the library are in walking distance, will have as many, if not more, activities to them than are out in Leisure Town. This project will also promote sustainable energy with the solar rooftops that was not discussed. The obviouses are the permanent affordable housing is close to public transportation. It will provide appropriate housing for our special need individual as seniors. And the tree mitigation on this site is almost 2 to 1. So again, I'm comfortable that the project meets the findings for a zoning map amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Next, Commissioner Beaumont has his hand up, and that the vice chair again. Mike, I'll ask you to put your hand down. There we go. And Doug, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm the only planning commissioner who lives in this area. And it's similar to Farmstead, where the Planning Commission voted 7-0 to deny the farmstead, but the City Council passed it anyway, which is fine. But I have to live in this area, and I have issues with the parking on and off street. I have issues with the traffic increase, a bump in traffic. I have issues with the 3-story architecture that does not flow with everything else in the area. We already have 2 apartment complexes that are mostly low income in the area. And I have not talked to one resident in this area that supports this. So I am going to, it's a great project, but I think it's the wrong site. So I'm going to have to say no on this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Beaumont. I saw the vice chair had his hand up, but it's not there now. Brendan, did you want to talk again?
I just had a question that was spurred by the applicant. If you could answer my question about why Eden is unique in terms of their ability to manage parking issues. It seems like they were bragging about their enforcement measures, and if you could tell us what those are.
Anybody from Eden want to talk about your ability to enforce parking restrictions on the site? So I see Jared's hand is up. Jared, go ahead, and then Andrea's hand. Okay, just Jared. Go ahead, Jared.
Hi, so my name's Jared Parker. I work for Eden Housing. I'm actually the property supervisor that would be overseeing this site in general. I do want to let you know all our sites in Vacaville are very monitored very heavily when it comes to parking. We make sure that, one, I apologize if it sounded like we were bragging. That's definitely not what I was trying to do. So I'm really sorry if it came off that way. But we do have standards. Those standards are we have to make sure that that person driving that vehicle does have a valid license, valid registration, and insurance, just in case if there's any incidents or issues on the property itself. When it comes to parking, we have a very strict parking policy that each resident does have to sign, letting them understand and note that there's no storage. If your car is leaking oils or anything like that, we do ask that you get it fixed and that you will not be allowed to park in your spot until the vehicle is fixed. We do ask that it's registered at all times, and that if it's not registered, we will ask you to remove the vehicle or get it registered. When it comes to towing, we do try to follow most city standards, making sure that we give ample enough time for people to allow to move it after we sticker it. If it's not moved within a standard time, we do make sure that we work with our resident to make sure they're comfortable as well, making sure that the vehicle is towed so that they can park in their spot. I apologize dearly. I can't speak on behalf of street parking or anything like that. Unfortunately, Eden does not control those things. I'm sure Emily would definitely be able to speak on that. We will work very closely with Housing Authority and Emily. Anytime Emily comes to us with any concerns, we get them taken care of right away. Our relationship with Emily and her team is very close. And so when it comes to parking on our sites, we make sure that we uphold not only Eden standards, the city standards, but also, making sure that our residents are comfortable as well too.
Thank you, Jared. I know I have two commissioners that asked questions early, but I haven't heard from yet in this discussion. And that's either Commissioner Lightfoot or Commissioner Aldridge. If you want to give some input, I know I have one or two thoughts, but I'd love to hear from you guys first. Go ahead, Ralph, you have the floor. Commissioner Lightfoot, you're still muted, but you have the floor. And then Commissioner Aldridge and then Commissioner Brecken. Go ahead, Ralph.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. I really appreciate the thoughts tonight and the communication tonight between staff and the commission and the discussion we've had. There's been some concerns raised by the commissioners, and I feel that the staff did a great job in answering those questions. This community has issues with parking, and I feel like the project itself meets all the basic requirements, and I can't bring myself to think about denying the project when it does meet the basic requirements. So at this point, I feel like I've made up my mind, and I'm leaning towards approving the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Lightfoot. Commissioner Aldridge, you have the floor, and then Commissioner Brecken. Go ahead, Jen.
Yes, I certainly have listened closely to tonight and been on the commission for a number of years and have worked with Eden Properties before. They are an incredible organization and have brought a lot to Vacaville and are continuing to do so, and I certainly appreciate that. I'm pretty comfortable with all the questions that were brought up tonight, and I think they have answered them to my satisfaction anyway. And so I think I'm willing to support this project. I think as a senior and knowing the needs of seniors in this community, this is something that Vacaville will need and appreciate for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eldridge. Commissioner Brecken, you have the floor. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, I would also like to say that I really appreciate all the work that everybody's done, staff and Eden. They did a lot to change the project to a senior project, and senior housing is needed. I understand Commissioner Beaumont's feelings about the project maybe doesn't really belong here. They did look at alternative sites. I don't know how intensely, but they did look at alternative sites and came back to this site. My issue, as I said, is that I don't want to be causing people public health concerns or issues. I didn't expect to see the numbers I saw at the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District annual report. They are concerning. 10 in a million is the standard. That you have to be below that, and the annual report shows 26 in a million for that particular gas station, or I don't know, it's 26 or 27.6, sorry. So, I mean, I feel like we need information we need the consultant Montrose to explain what's the deal. Without having Montrose here, I think I would like to motion to approve the project as stated, with the addition of a MERV filtration system and vapor recovery system, unless the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District states in a letter that that is not necessary. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of to get Montrose talking to Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District and get that issue worked out. Other than that, if that motion doesn't take, I think I would be a no vote, and I don't really want to be a no vote, as Brandon said. So the other alternative is to motion to delay this until the next meeting. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. I see Albert's hand is up and he may wish to address the air quality issue. Wendy and Jan, both of you still have your hand up in Zoom. And Wendy, I don't think you're muted yet. So I'm going to go to Albert, and then I'm going to let you guys know what I'm thinking and then start looking for a motion. Albert, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide a point of clarification for the Commission that this environmental document and the environmental analysis for air quality associated with this project was provided to Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District, was circulated to them. And they had the information that you have, and we didn't receive any comments from them on this. And that's the status of their review for the project.
Okay, thank you, Albert. So my thought, because it looks like we have a fairly split commission on this, and we're dealing with an infill project. And the questions that are being brought up tonight are typical for any time where we have infill, as far as the impact of the neighborhood, traffic, parking, the compatibility of the buildings with those that are nearby. And several years ago, we had talked about, as infill was becoming more important, we were going to be dealing with these issues. And sure enough, here it is right in front of us. Kind of going down the list, I think if Yolo Solano was provided the project and chose not to comment, Department of Toxic Substance Control have the project and only made their standard comments on that, that I'm satisfied. I'm not enthused, but I'm satisfied that the air quality issue has been looked at by those who are responsible to deal with it. Regarding the scale, it's one of those things that this community is unfortunately going to have to deal with quite a bit coming in with the future, is larger scale projects than we've seen before, and especially to get the density that makes a subsidized low income project viable. That means we have more units, and that ends up being larger buildings. So given the fact that if we're after the density, we need the scale and the height, that's one of those things where I can't say, I'm thrilled with it, but I understand the need there. Eden talks about the parking enforcement. And I'll tell you, Emily, one of the things that I wish we had was some sort of really a financial deal in this, where if they were not adequately dealing, that there would be essentially liquidated damages where the city could come back and say, you're not dealing with your parking issues and it's causing a problem. And now there's a fee that goes in with that. That's not within, maybe not within our realm, but certainly something to look at is a damage issue in future contract to make sure that we really can hold the feet of developers to the fire as far as dealing with the parking. As far as the history of this, yeah, years ago, the city talked about, should this be commercial or should it be recreation? And I think that with creating the residential overlay and the sort of discussion we've had here, we've done our ethical obligation to the city's residents to talk these things through. And with the city having created the RO, I think that this is one of those areas where it could be appropriately applied. So in balance, I think this is a project that I can support. Just the impact on the neighborhood, and I understand Commissioner Beaumont's concerns. Yes, this is one that the neighbors are going to notice, but because we have a real crisis in housing and affordable housing, especially for seniors, I think that's one where we need to deal with it. And this, using the residential overlay, is one of those ways to deal with it. Now, I see Commissioner Brecken has her hand up, and since she had talked about a motion she wanted to make, including with an amendment of requiring some sort of filtration, I'm going to give Wendy the chance to make the first motion, though I think I know how it's going to go. But Wendy, I want to give you the respect that you talked about a motion you wanted to make, so I'll give you the chance to make it. Commissioner Brecken, you have the floor. Wait, actually, just before I do that, I do want to make a quick note for everybody that we did receive updated findings of fact, and those were sent out by staff. So any action we take would be based on those updated findings or the revised findings of fact sent out by staff, as well as what we've heard tonight. So any action should make sure it specifies that's based upon the revised findings of fact that have been distributed to the commission and the public. Sorry to cut you off, Wendy, and you once again have the floor.
Thank you. So Albert's response that the information was sent to the Air Quality Management District is kind of vague because we don't know what was sent. Was the full document sent, or the draft health risk assessment, or just conclusions? We don't know why the Air Quality Management District didn't answer. Did they not have resources? Did they look at it? There was no, attempt at communication. I don't think staff or Montrose had looked at the 2021 data, because I think this was done maybe before the data came out. I'm not sure. So this is why I would like to motion to let's see. What is the motion? Do we have a slide with the motion of what I would be amending, or?
So Wendy, let me see if I can help you.
Adopt the mitigated. Yeah, adopt the mitigated. Sorry.
I think the motion you'd want to make is to approve the project based on the recommendations contained in the staff report, with an additional condition of approval requiring, and I'm going to ask staff for a little bit of help here as well as Wendy, requiring adequate filtration be put on the air conditioning of each unit to address possible toxic air contaminants from the adjoining gasoline service station. Did I get that right for you, Wendy?
Specifically MERV filtration, MERV. I think MERV 13, I believe, was required in the other project, in the Cliffside project. Also, what was required there was a vapor recovery system of some kind that captured the vapor under the building. And that would be my motion. And,
Okay, so let me
unless the Yolo Solani Air Quality Management District states in a letter after consultation that this is unnecessary, that this filtration is unnecessary.
So I'm going to try and talk process here. There's two ways we can do this. We can delay action on it and ask for Yolo Solano to specifically look at and comment on the project. Or we can take an action to approve the project with an amendment that requires MERV filters on the air conditioning units and a vapor recovery system placed on the site to reduce or eliminate the chances of fuel vapors on the site. So I'll ask you one or the other. Would you prefer to delay action or to take an action with an amended condition of approval?
I think take an action with the amendments.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Brecken to approve the project based on the findings of fact that are included with an amended or a new condition of approval requiring placement of MERV filters on the air conditioning units and an appropriate vapor recovery system on the site to reduce or eliminate vapors from the adjoining gas station. And here I'm going to be a little bit formal. I have a motion. Do I have a second on that motion? I see no second on the motion, so the motion dies. I will now ask for anyone else who wishes to make a motion on the project. Wendy, your hand is still up. Do you want to make an alternative motion or let somebody else do so?
I'll let somebody else do so.
Okay. Would anyone else like to make a motion on the project? Wendy, your hand's still up, so I'll ask you to drop it. Commissioner Fortney, you have the floor. Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Chair. By simple motion, I recommend that the City Council adopt the mitigated negative declaration and approve the zoning map amendment, density bonus and plan development request for the Oak Grove Apartments located at 475 West Monte Vista Avenue with the revised findings of fact and subject to the conditions of approval.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second for that motion.
Yes, I will second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Fortney and a second from Commissioner Aldridge. I will now ask the secretary to call the roll.
Commissioner Aldridge.
Yes.
Beaumont.
No.
Brecken.
No.
Courtney.
Yes.
Lightfoot.
Yes.
Vice Chair Klein.
No.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. I believe we have a 4-3 vote.
That is correct.
Director Morris, what is then the disposition of this item?
Thank you, Chair McCauley. This item will be going for a public hearing at City Council in March.
Do we have a date specific or just sometime in March?
March 22nd, subject to Albert confirming that I have the correct date.
That is correct.
Thank you. And that concludes item number 7, which is public hearings. We don't, because this is a special meeting, we don't have the normal reports from the directors, but we go on to commissioner comments. I don't know if this is my last meeting or not, since we're up for appointments, and I don't know if I will be reappointed. If not, it's been an honor serving the city and enjoy working with you. If so, it will be an honor to continue to serve the city and continue to work with whoever is on the commission at that time. And those are the comments that I have. Other commissioners, Jan, you're unmuted, and then Doug, go ahead.
I will second what you just said because I am up for reappointment and I don't know whether I'm going to be reappointed or not, but I have enjoyed all my years with the commission and I hope they continue. That's my dream, that's my wish. But if not, I will miss everyone and that's all I can say.
Thanks, Jan. Doug.
Yeah, it's just been an honor and a privilege to serve for the city. If I get not voted back, approved or appointed, that's fine. But it's been fun. It's been informative, and I've always looked at what's best for the people, the residents, not for the city. So I appreciate being here. And if I'm not here, Sayonara.
Thanks, Doug. Brandon, you have the floor. Go ahead, Vice Chair Klein.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McCauley. And I just want to thank all of you. This has been my first year. I've been kind of brought some fresh ways of thinking, I think, for the most part, to way that things are done. And I appreciate everyone's patience and the time that I've been able to spend with each of you, learning about your perspective to public service here in this way. And I particularly have enjoyed working with the staff. And Aaron, congratulations on your first year or whatever. Your first year with us, at least, has been delightful. And I wish you and the rest of the staff many more years to come.
Thanks, Brandon. Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also like to thank everybody for a really wonderful experience. It's really an honor to be working for the city and trying to determine what is best for the city that we live in and our community. And it takes a lot of thought and a lot of work. And I just appreciate everybody for putting in the effort. Thanks.
Thanks, Wendy. Mike, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's been a pleasure getting to know these commissioners. I really hope this group is appointed and we all come back. It's a group that has a lively discussion, very engaged. I think it benefits the community. Staff has done a good job keeping us on track. And I look forward to seeing you all again, not only on the commission, but in person, hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Ralph, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I agree. The dynamic of this group has brought together great discussion and great ideas. And I think that itself is, what our job should be is implemented for. We have the opportunity to discuss these topics, and it's great that we have a dynamic group with differing ideas and we can really talk them through. I feel very privileged to have served the last 2 years. I agree. This group would be great to come back, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, Ralph. Doug, your hand's up again.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank two people. I wanted to thank Chair McCauley for doing such a wonderful job being chair this year. You've handled this Zoom stuff, just a wonderful job. And also the new director, Morris. I think the city's in great hands with you. And I appreciate you coming in and taking over and doing a yeoman's job with that also. So Godspeed to everybody.
Thanks, Doug. And with that, I will say Godspeed and best luck to the commission in the future, whatever its structure is. And we are adjourned. Good night, Vacaville.